A veteran's abandoned dam hid a $200 million secret. Now the whole town wants a piece. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. In the rolling hills of a small, forgotten town, nestled between aging trees and silent fields, there was an abandoned dam. Once a proud engineering feat, it now stood like a forgotten relic, crumbling at the edges, ignored by the world. The dam had been built decades ago by the military, designed to control water flow and serve as a backup in case of emergency. But after the war ended and the military abandoned the project, it fell into disrepair. Over time, the dam became a part of the landscape, as invisible as the weeds that grew through its cracks. The town around it, small and quiet, had long moved on, its residents more concerned with the everyday struggles of life. But for Jack Callahan, a 42-year-old veteran with more scars than he cared to count, the dam was more than just a forgotten structure. After losing his family in a tragic accident, Jack had spent years drifting, never quite finding a place to call home. But when a letter arrived informing him that he had inherited the land surrounding the dam, something stirred deep inside him. It wasn't much, just a patch of land and a crumbling structure. But for Jack, it was the start of something new. His military background had prepared him for the worst, but even he didn't expect what he would find at the dam. When Jack first arrived at the site, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a scent of damp earth and moss. The dam's towering concrete walls loomed above him, and as he walked along the dry riverbed, a sense of foreboding began to creep over him. The place felt heavy, as though it was holding on to something, a secret perhaps, buried deep within its walls. His dog, Scout, a German shepherd who had been his loyal companion through thick and thin, was on edge. The dog's ears perked up, his nostrils flaring as if he sensed something Jack couldn't quite put his finger on. They moved slowly through the ruins, Jack's boots crunching against the gravel, and Scout's sharp eyes scanning every corner. It was then that Jack stumbled upon something strange, a small door hidden in the side of the dam, barely visible under years of overgrowth. His curiosity piqued. Jack cleared away the vines, revealing an old rusted lock. The door was sealed tight, but Jack's instincts told him there was something important behind it. Without a moment's hesitation, he found a crowbar in his truck and pried the door open. Inside, a musty smell filled the air as Jack stepped into the darkness. The beam of his flashlight flickered as it illuminated what lay before him, rows of crates, all labeled with military markings. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough, but as Jack moved closer, he realized that some of the crates were strangely heavy. They didn't contain old equipment or scrap metal like he had expected. No. These crates contained something far more valuable. As he carefully opened one of the crates, Jack's heart skipped a beat. Inside were stacks of documents, maps, and at the bottom, several wooden boxes sealed shut. But what caught his eye was a small, ornate chest, the kind you would expect to find in a treasure hunter's wildest dreams. The chest was old, its intricate designs covered in dust, and as Jack opened it, he uncovered what seemed to be an unimaginable fortune. Gold, precious stones, and stacks of bonds. All of it carefully hidden away in this abandoned dam. It wasn't just a storage space. It was a vault, carefully crafted to protect something worth millions. Jack stood there, stunned, his mind racing. How could something like this have remained hidden for so long? And more importantly, why had he of all people been chosen to find it? As the full scope of the discovery began to sink in, Jack knew that he couldn't keep it to himself. Word would spread, and soon, the entire town would be clamoring for a piece of the fortune that lay beneath the dam's forgotten walls. But Jack had a decision to make. Would he share this incredible find with the town, or would he keep it all for himself? I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me. Standing in the dim light of the hidden room beneath the abandoned dam, the glow from my flashlight flickered against the stacks of crates, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the treasure I had just uncovered. Gold bars, ancient bonds, and gemstones. Things that should have been locked away in a museum or in the hands of people far wealthier and more powerful than me. But here they were, in this forsaken place, hidden away for decades. The chest I had just opened contained more wealth than most people could ever dream of, yet it had been buried under layers of dust and decay, waiting for someone to find it. And I, Jack Callahan, a man with no family and nothing left to lose, was the one who stumbled upon it. My loyal dog, Scout, stood by my side, his ears perked up and eyes alert, sensing the tension in the air. I couldn't help but wonder, why me? What had led me to this moment? Was it fate, or mere coincidence? I couldn't answer that, not yet. As I continued to sift through the crates, the weight of my discovery started to settle in. This wasn't just about me anymore. Word was bound to get out. The town, small as it was, would soon learn that the old dam had hidden a fortune. And once they knew, there would be no stopping the rush. People would come, desperate for a piece of the wealth that lay beneath the earth. I could already imagine the questions, the demands, the sense of entitlement. What would I do? Keep it for myself? Share it with the town? Or, was there a third option? The thought of sharing this incredible find with the community felt like the right thing to do. But would it be? The town had been struggling for years. Farms had failed, businesses had closed, and hope had all but disappeared. Perhaps this treasure was the answer to all their prayers. But at what cost? There was also a darker side to this discovery that I hadn't yet fully understood. The dam had been built decades ago by the military, and it had been abandoned for a reason. What had the government been hiding? The thought of opening that can of worms was unsettling. Was there something more dangerous buried here? Some part of the past I wasn't prepared to face. I couldn't let go of the feeling that this was more than just treasure. Scout seemed to feel it too. His behavior had changed since we entered this room. He was more tense, more alert, like he sensed something lurking just beyond our vision. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the eerie feeling that had settled in my chest. Perhaps it was just the weight of the discovery messing with my mind. Stay close, boy, I muttered, as if my dog could somehow chase away the unease that gnawed at me. I started to pack the items back into the crate, careful not to disturb them more than I had to. I needed time to think. I needed to process everything. As I closed the chest and turned to leave, I was struck by the sound of a distant voice. It was faint, almost as if carried on the wind, but unmistakable. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that the voice was calling my name. I wasn't alone. Someone else knew about the dam. Someone else had been watching. Scout's growl broke the silence, his body tensing beside me. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't sure if it was the treasure that had attracted attention, or if it was something else entirely. But I knew one thing for certain. My life had just taken a drastic turn. The town was going to find out, and once they did, nothing would be the same again. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After hearing that faint voice, calling my name from a distance, a chill ran down my spine. Scout's growl had stopped, but his stance was tense, his body rigid as if he were trying to tell me something. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, every instinct screaming that I was no longer alone in this desolate place. I turned slowly, scanning the shadows in the dim light of the dam's cavernous interior. The walls seemed to close in, the sound of my own breathing deafening in the silence. Was it just the pressure of the discovery, or was there someone else here? I needed to leave. Fast. But before I could take another step, I heard the rustling of leaves, faint but distinct, from outside the entrance to the dam. It was not the wind. Someone was out there, lurking. My thoughts raced back to the treasure I had uncovered. Who else knew about it? The government's involvement, the secrecy surrounding the dam. It all started to make a dangerous kind of sense. The idea of the military abandoning a project so vast, so filled with hidden riches, it didn't sit right with me. And now, here I was, standing on the edge of something far bigger than I had imagined. I pulled out my flashlight and approached the entrance, keeping my movements slow and steady. Scout followed closely behind, his eyes scanning every corner. The wind had stopped, but there was an eerie stillness in the air that made my skin crawl. As I reached the doorway, I stopped short. A shadow moved outside, just at the edge of the clearing where the dam's foundation met the woods. Someone was out there, and they knew I was here. My hand instinctively went to the gun holstered at my side. a habit formed over years of military service. But I couldn't be sure if it was friend or foe. I wasn't going to make that mistake. I stepped back into the shadows, keeping my presence hidden, and waited. My mind raced. I thought about the town. The secret of the dam was going to be hard to keep. The word would spread quickly, and when it did, there was no telling who would come. Would they come with open hands or open greed? The town had always been a tight-knit community, but desperation changes people. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to myself. But if someone else knew about the dam, I had no choice but to confront it. The minutes stretched out, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the figure outside shifted again, and I saw them clearly. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, moving cautiously toward the dam. He paused for a moment, looking around as if checking the surroundings, and then began to approach the entrance. My heart skipped a beat. Was this the person who had been following me? I didn't know, but I wasn't about to take any chances. I waited, watching closely. The man stepped into the light, and I saw his face. A face I recognized. It was Sheriff Thomas, the local lawman. My stomach dropped. Sheriff Thomas had been a part of this town for as long as I could remember. He wasn't just a sheriff. He was a trusted figure, a man who had been through the same struggles as everyone else. I had no reason to distrust him, but given the circumstances, nothing felt certain anymore. He had to have known about the dam, about the wealth buried beneath it. And if he knew, then so did others. I stepped forward cautiously, my boots crunching against the gravel. I wasn't sure if I should confront him or wait, but there was no time to waste. "Sheriff," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. He froze, turning quickly toward me, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. But when he saw me, his posture relaxed slightly, though his eyes were sharp. "Jack," he said, his voice low but steady. "Didn't expect to see you here." I could say the same, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What are you doing here, Sheriff?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the entrance of the dam. "I could ask you the same, but I already know. Word's been getting around. People are talking. About the dam. About what's hidden there." I narrowed my eyes. So it was true. The town was already buzzing with rumors. But how much did he know? How much did the town really know? "What do you want, Sheriff?" I asked, my voice carrying a hint of warning. "You're asking the wrong question, Jack," he said, his voice growing more serious. "The real question is, what happens next? You found something that could change this town's future, and people are already lining up to get a piece of it. You can't keep it to yourself. It's too big. It's too important." I felt a twinge of anger rise within me. Was that what this was about? A claim on the treasure? This isn't about money, Sheriff. It's about what's right. What's been buried for decades. Sheriff Thomas studied me carefully, his eyes not leaving mine. "I know you, Jack. You've never been the type to keep something for yourself. But you can't ignore what's happening. People are desperate. They'll come for it, whether you like it or not." His words hung in the air like a dart. Promise. The town was already starting to change. And as much as I wanted to pretend that I had control over this, I knew deep down that I was about to be swept up in something far bigger than myself. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I stood there in the cold, the weight of Sheriff Thomas's words hanging in the air between us. The wind had picked up again, and the rustling of the trees outside the dam seemed to echo the unease I was feeling. He was right. I couldn't ignore the gravity of what I had discovered, not anymore. But I still wasn't sure what to do with it. I had found something buried for decades, something that could change the course of the town's future, but at what cost? I had always thought of myself as someone who believed in doing the right thing, not just what was easy. But this was bigger than me, bigger than the town. As much as I wanted to keep it hidden, to preserve the peace, I knew deep down that it was already too late for that. People would come. They would want a piece of it, and once they knew, there was no stopping the tide. I looked at Sheriff Thomas again, my hand instinctively resting on the worn grip of my gun. "So, what do you want, Sheriff?" I asked, my voice steady but edged with frustration. "You know what they'll do once they find out. The whole town will be after it. They'll want their share, and you know they'll fight for it. It's just how things go when money's involved." He gave me a hard, unreadable stare. "I'm not here to fight you, Jack. I'm here to help. We need to decide what happens next. If you're not careful, the whole town could tear itself apart over this." I glanced at Scout, who had been unusually quiet throughout the exchange. His amber eyes were sharp, his ears twitching slightly, as though he sensed something more than just our conversation. I could feel the weight of his presence at my side, and I knew that whatever decision I made, I wasn't making it alone. I ran my fingers through my hair, taking a deep breath. The reality of the situation was setting in. I had found a fortune, but it came with strings attached, and those strings were starting to unravel, pulling me deeper into something I wasn't sure I was prepared for. So what do you suggest we do? I asked, my voice quieter now. Sheriff Thomas sighed, looking out toward the dam as if he could somehow see the future in its rusted walls. You can't keep it secret forever, Jack. If you don't make a move soon, others will. He paused, his eyes narrowing. But we can do this carefully. We can make sure the right people get what they deserve, and we can keep things from falling apart. But that means you have to decide who gets what, who gets to control it, and who gets a piece of this fortune. I thought about it for a long time, the weight of his words sinking in. Who was I to decide who deserved a part of the treasure? The town had been struggling for years. People had lost everything: homes, businesses, their sense of hope. But if I gave in to their demands, what would it do to the community? Would it unite them, or would it tear them apart? Sheriff Thomas wasn't wrong. People would come, and once they did, I would have to make some hard choices. I can't do this alone, I said finally, my voice almost a whisper. If I'm going to share this, I need to know I'm doing the right thing. I need to know it's going to help, not hurt. Sheriff Thomas nodded. I can help with that. We can set up a plan. Keep it fair, keep it controlled. But you need to act fast. The longer this sits, the more people will come looking for a piece of it. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since this whole thing started. He wasn't just after the money. He was trying to protect the town, trying to keep it from falling apart. He was right. If I didn't act soon, things would spiral out of control. I couldn't let that happen. Okay, I said, my decision made. Let's do this. But we need to keep things under control. We need to make sure the right people get a chance. Sheriff Thomas smiled, a rare, small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I knew you'd come around. We both turned back toward the dam, the wind howling. In the distance, it was time to face the reality of what lay ahead. Whatever I had uncovered, whatever was hidden in that dam, was about to change everything, and I wasn't sure if we could handle it. I stood there in the cold, my hand gripping the railing of the old, rusted bridge that led into the heart of the dam. The wind had picked up again, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and the chill of the mountains. I felt the weight of the decision that lay ahead. The treasure I had uncovered was already starting to change everything. People were already talking. The town, which had been teetering on the edge for years, was now filled with whispers, speculation, and, most importantly, hope. Hope that the fortune buried in the dam would change their lives, just as it had changed mine. But what would it mean for the town? Could they handle the power that came with it? The choices I made now would define everything. I looked over at Sheriff Thomas, standing silently beside me. His face was unreadable, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. He had been right. If I didn't act quickly, if I didn't make the tough choices, this could tear the town apart. He had suggested setting up a plan, something to keep things under control, but I wasn't so sure it was that simple. I was no politician. I wasn't used to making decisions for an entire town. But there was no turning back now. I had to decide who got a piece of the treasure and who would be left out. The town had suffered for so long. People had lost everything: homes, jobs, the things that had once given them pride. And now, here I was, with the power to change all of that. The thought of sharing the wealth with the town felt like the right thing to do. But as I stood there, watching the wind whip through the trees, I realized just how dangerous it could be. If I gave too much to the wrong people, it could ignite a firestorm of greed and jealousy. If I didn't give enough, it could create enemies I didn't want. I turned back toward Sheriff Thomas. What do you think we should do next? I asked, my voice sounding more tired than I intended. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. We need to be strategic about this, Jack. The town is already divided. If we don't handle this carefully, we'll have a full-blown conflict on our hands. I nodded, knowing he was right. The last thing I wanted was for the town to turn on each other over this. I had to make sure it didn't happen. But how? We can't make everyone happy, Sheriff Thomas continued, his voice low. Some people are going to want more than they deserve. Some won't want anything at all. But we can't let that cloud our judgment. We have to think about the future. His words echoed in my mind as I walked back toward the dam. Scout, ever loyal, walked by my side, his eyes watchful and alert. The town was waiting. The people were waiting. and I was the one who had to decide what happened next. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind constantly racing with thoughts of what to do. The dam's treasure, hidden for so long, had already brought enough chaos into my life. But the real challenge was only beginning. I had to navigate the complex web of relationships in the town, old friends, new enemies, and everyone in between. And then there was the pressure of knowing that every decision I made would affect their lives in ways I couldn't even begin to predict. It wasn't just about the money. It was about power, about control, and about the future of the community. One night, I sat in the small cabin I had started to call home, staring at the map I had found in the treasure chest. It showed the dam's layout, but it also had markings, coordinates, notes in the margins, as if someone had been keeping track of something. It was clear that there was more to the dam's history than just being a military project. The more I looked at the map, the more I began to realize that there were secrets buried here, secrets that no one had uncovered yet. I had already found one secret. What else was hidden in the walls of this forgotten place? What other dangers might I uncover? But before I could get lost in my thoughts again, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find a man standing there. Someone I had never seen before. He was tall, with a weathered face and eyes that spoke of too many years spent on the road. His clothes were worn, and his hands were calloused. "You Jack Callahan?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I heard you found something. Something big." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied him closely. "Who are you?" I asked, my hand instinctively reaching for the handle of my gun. The man raised his hands in surrender. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just looking for something. You know what I mean." His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady. The man looked me up and down before answering. "I want what's mine." And just like that, I knew things were about to get a lot more complicated. I stared at the man standing in front of me, his presence unsettling, his words even more so. "I want what's mine." His voice was low, firm, like he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. My hand hovered over the gun at my side, my instincts telling me that this wasn't just some random stranger, but someone who had been tracking me, maybe even the town, long before I stumbled upon the treasure buried beneath the dam. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate step back, gauging the situation, my mind racing through every possible outcome. "What exactly are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man glanced around, making sure no one else was in sight, and then leaned in closer, his face hardening with each word. "The dam," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I know what you found, and I know it's not just gold and old papers. There's more, much more." I felt a chill run down my spine. So he knew. But how much did he know? Who was this man, really? "You're not making sense," I replied, keeping my voice level, though a part of me wondered if this was all part of something much bigger than I had imagined. "I'm just here to settle something." He took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. "Settle it? What's there to settle?" I asked, the tension in the air thickening with each passing second. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, eyes that had survived things I couldn't even begin to fathom. "You don't get it," he muttered. "You think this treasure is just about money. It's not. This goes deeper. The dam, the treasure, it's part of something much bigger. Something the town doesn't even know about. Something I've been trying to find for years." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of his words. "So what? You think I'm part of this?" "I don't think you're part of it," he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost as if he was trying to make a connection. "I think you're in the middle of it. And now that you've found it, you have to understand something." He paused, looking me dead in the eye. "You can't keep it. The town won't let you. People will start asking questions. People will come after it. People will come after you." My pulse quickened. His words hit home harder than I wanted to admit. This wasn't just about the treasure. It was about control, power, and the consequences of discovering something that wasn't meant to be found. "Who are you?" I asked again, the weight of his cryptic message starting to sink in. "The name's Cole," he said, his lips curling into a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And I've been watching you for a long time." My mind raced. Watching me? But why? What did he want with me? Why? I finally asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between us. "Because, Jack, I'm not the only one looking for what's buried in that dam. There are others, much worse than me. People with more power, more resources. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. And if you think you can just walk away from this, well, you're wrong. I took another step back, my thoughts spinning out of control. You're telling me that if I don't hand over what I found, these people will come after me. Exactly, Cole said, his voice sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. And I'm here to make sure you don't make that mistake. For a moment, silence settled in, the weight of his words pressing on me like a physical force. You want me to help you then? I asked, my voice strained, trying to make sense of his sudden offer. He nodded. Not help, Jack. Join me. We can work together. We know what's at stake. And together, we can make sure the treasure doesn't fall into the wrong hands. His words were like a twisted kind of offer, a bargain I wasn't sure I could trust. And if I don't join you? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Cole's eyes flickered with something darker, something I couldn't quite read. Then you're on your own. And trust me, that's not a position you want to be in. He turned and walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. I watched him go, the weight of his words settling in like a stone in my gut. What had I gotten myself into? Sheriff Thomas had been right. This was bigger than just a treasure. It was a war, and I had unknowingly stepped right into the middle of it. The dam had always been a symbol of something forgotten, a piece of history that had been buried away. But now it felt like it was calling to me, pulling me deeper into a web of lies, power, and greed. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. The treasure could change everything for the town, or destroy it. But no matter what I decided, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be able to stop it. Not anymore. I stood in the dim light of my cabin, the weight of Cole's words still hanging in the air. The wind outside howled, rattling the walls as if it, too, was trying to warn me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in way over my head. The treasure in the dam had already started a chain reaction, and now I had to make a choice. Work with Cole, a man whose motives were still unclear, or face the consequences of going against him. Either way, I knew I couldn't keep the treasure hidden. People would come. The whole town was already buzzing with rumors. The question was, how long could I hold them off? The next morning, I made my way to the town hall, trying to clear my mind of the unease that had settled in my chest. Sheriff Thomas had been right. If I didn't act quickly, things would spiral out of control. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the storm to hit. I needed to be proactive. When I arrived at the town hall, I found a small crowd already gathered outside. Word had spread fast. People were talking, eyes full of curiosity and suspicion. As I walked up the steps, they turned to look at me. It was clear that they had questions, and I was the one who had to answer them. Sheriff Thomas was already inside, standing by the door, his face set in a hard line. Jack, he said as I stepped in. I'm glad you're here. We've got a lot to discuss. I nodded, trying to keep my nerves in check. Yeah, I know. Things are moving faster than I thought. Sheriff Thomas motioned for me to sit. We need to figure out how to handle this. The town's already divided. Some people want to know exactly what you found, while others think you should just hand it over to the town. There's a lot of talk about what's fair, and you know as well as I do that fairness doesn't always win out in situations like this. I sighed, sinking into the chair across from him. I don't know if fairness matters anymore. It's not about fairness, it's about survival. If we don't handle this right, we could lose everything. He nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with understanding. You're right. That's why we need a plan. We can't just throw it all out there and hope for the best. There's too much at stake. I sat back, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. What do you suggest? We need to establish some ground rules, Sheriff Thomas said. First, we need to make sure the treasure doesn't end up in the wrong hands. We can't let people with bad intentions get a hold of it. Second, we need to decide who gets to control it. You found it, so it's technically yours, but that doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want with it. The town has a stake in this, too. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. I don't want this to tear the town apart. I came here to start over, not to start a war. I know, he said, his voice softening. But sometimes, things happen that are beyond our control. The dam, the treasure, it's all part of something much bigger. And it's not just the town that's watching. People from outside are already starting to take notice. We can't afford to be caught off guard. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. So what do we do? How do we keep this from spiraling out of control? We take control, Sheriff Thomas replied. We create a plan, set some boundaries. We make sure the right people are involved and that no one gets greedy. We don't let fear and greed dictate what happens next. I stood up, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling on my shoulders. All right, let's make this happen. The next few days were a blur of meetings and discussions. We brought in community leaders, people I trusted, and a few who had their own agendas. There were heated arguments, long debates, but in the end, we managed to come up with a plan. We would take the treasure and use it for the greater good of the town, but we would put checks and balances in place to make sure no one person could control it all. A council would be formed, and each decision would be made collectively. But there was still a sense of unease hanging in the air. No matter what we decided, there would always be someone who felt they had been wronged. As I walked back to my cabin that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. The treasure in the dam wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was a catalyst, a spark that had the potential to either ignite a fire of hope or burn the town to the ground. I wasn't sure which one it was going to be, but I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. I woke up to the sound of distant thunder, the rumble shaking the windows of my cabin. The storm that had been brewing for days was finally making its move, and as I lay there, the weight of the situation settled on me again. The decision had been made. The council was in place, and the town had agreed on a plan. But it didn't feel like enough. There was something nagging at the back of my mind, something that told me this wasn't going to end as easily as I hoped. The treasure buried beneath the dam wasn't just a financial boon. It had become a symbol of hope. Yes, but also of fear, greed, and the power to change everything. People were already starting to push their agendas. And in the dark corners of the town, I knew there were people who didn't care about what was best for the community. They only cared about what they could take. As I prepared for the day, I thought about the message Cole had left me. He had warned me that people were watching. And I knew he wasn't just talking about the town. The outside world had already caught wind of the treasure, and there were whispers of outsiders coming to claim their piece. What did that mean for the town? What did that mean for me? I had a choice to make. I could try to control the situation, keep it within the town's walls, or I could let it spill out into the world and risk everything. The weight of that decision pressed on me as I walked into town that morning. It was quieter than usual, the streets empty except for a few of the regulars, huddled in the diner, whispering over coffee. They were all waiting for something, waiting for answers, waiting for direction. The treasure had already begun to change the dynamics of this small town, and I could feel it. There was a palpable tension in the air, like the storm was brewing not just in the sky, but in the hearts of the people. I made my way to the town hall, where the council had gathered for the first official meeting. Sheriff Thomas was already there, standing by the door, his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the room. When he saw me, he gave me a nod. "Jack," he said, his voice low, "you ready for this?" I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The room fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to me. I could feel the weight of their expectations, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about me. It was about the town. I sat at the head of the table, the rest of the council members filling the seats around me. The meeting started like any other, with pleasantries and formalities, but I could feel the underlying current of urgency. The treasure was the elephant in the room, and everyone knew it. As we began discussing how to allocate the wealth, the first arguments began. Some people wanted to use it to rebuild the infrastructure, fix the roads, restore the water system, create jobs. Others wanted to set up a fund for the elderly and the poor, ensuring that no one was left behind. But as the discussion dragged on, it became clear that not everyone agreed on how to spend it. And then, the real tension surfaced. What about control? One of the council members, a local businessman named Aaron, asked, "Who gets to decide who manages the wealth? And what happens when we run out of it?" That was the question that had been lingering in the back of my mind. It wasn't just about the money, it was about power. Who would have the power to control it? And who would be left with nothing? The tension in the room grew thick, and I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me again. "We can't let one person control it all," Sheriff Thomas said, his voice sharp. "If we do, we risk losing everything. We need to make sure it's fair for everyone, not just a select few." The others murmured in agreement, but I could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. They all wanted a piece of the treasure, and the more they argued, the clearer it became that no one was willing to let go. "We'll set up a board to oversee the distribution," I said, my voice steady. "A group of trusted individuals from within the town, People who have nothing to gain personally from this. They'll decide how it's used, and they'll keep it fair. No one person will have control. The room fell silent again, but this time, it was different. There was a sense of relief, mixed with wariness. The people wanted answers, and for a moment, they believed they had them. But I knew the storm was far from over. As I left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that the town was about to change in ways we couldn't predict. The treasure had already started to divide us, and no matter what we did, there would be those who felt wronged. And outside the town's walls, there were people who had their own plans. People like Cole, who had warned me that there were those who would stop at nothing to claim the wealth buried beneath the dam. I knew the road ahead would be hard. The storm wasn't just in the sky. It was in the hearts of the people, in the decisions we made, and in the lies we told ourselves about fairness. The town was about to find out just how much a treasure could change things, and I wasn't sure we were ready for what was coming. I woke up to the sound of rain hitting the roof, the steady rhythm almost soothing as I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes. It had been a long night, filled with decisions I wasn't sure I was ready to make. The treasure in the dam, the future of the town, and the whispers of those from outside. Everything was closing in on me. The council had agreed on a plan, but there was still so much left unsaid. I stood up, the weight of the situation pressing on my chest. It wasn't just about the treasure anymore. It was about trust, power, and the people I had to protect. The rain was still pouring down when I made my way into town. As I approached the diner, I could see the familiar faces, but they weren't the same anymore. There was a tension in the air, something heavy that hadn't been there before. People were watching, their eyes filled with questions and expectations. I wasn't the man I used to be. The discovery had changed me, and now the town was starting to feel the ripple effects of that change. Sheriff Thomas was already inside, sitting at his usual spot by the window. He looked up as I walked in, offering me a small nod. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. "I'm not sure," I replied, sitting down across from him. "Everything's moving too fast." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the room. "I know. We all feel it. The town's waiting, Jack. They want answers. And not just about the treasure, but about what happens next. People are nervous. Some of them are scared." I sighed, glancing out the window at the gray sky. I never thought it would get like this. I thought the dam was just some old relic. I never expected it to cause so much chaos. Sheriff Thomas didn't say anything for a moment, but I could see the understanding in his eyes. "It's not just about the treasure, Jack," he finally said. "It's about what it represents. It's a chance for people to change their lives. A chance to fix what's broken. But it's also a test of who we are, and who we're willing to become." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. The treasure wasn't just a windfall. It was a mirror reflecting the town's deepest desires, fears, and faults. "I know," I said, my voice heavy with the realization. "But it's not just the town I'm worried about. People from outside are already circling. People like Cole." Sheriff Thomas's expression darkened. "We both know there are forces at play that we can't control, but we can control how we respond. And we have to respond together." I knew he was right, but the reality of it all was starting to feel overwhelming. The treasure had brought us together, but it was also tearing us apart. As I left the diner, I noticed more people gathering in the square. They were talking in hushed tones, casting occasional glances in my direction. I felt their eyes on me, waiting. They were looking for answers, for a direction. But I didn't have any to give them. Not yet. I walked toward the town hall, my mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. The council had set a plan in motion, but how long would it hold? How long before greed, fear, and desperation broke through? The storm had passed, but the damage had already been done. The treasure had opened up something inside of us, something we couldn't take back. I walked into the town hall, where the council members were already gathered, their faces set with resolve. But beneath the surface, I could feel the unease. This was no longer just about the town's future, it was about survival. "We need to move fast," I said as I took my seat. "We've got people watching, and we can't afford to wait around for things to fall apart." There was a murmur of agreement, but no one seemed eager to act. They were all waiting for someone to make the first move. "We need to create a plan to protect the treasure," I continued. "We can't just let anyone take control of it. But we also need to make sure it benefits everyone, not just a few. One of the council members, a woman named Rebecca, spoke up. How do we do that? How do we make sure it's fair when everyone's going to want a piece of it? I took a deep breath. We need a system. A council of trusted individuals who will make decisions about the treasure. No one person should have more control than the others. The room fell silent as everyone considered the idea. Finally, Sheriff Thomas spoke again. I'll help you, Jack. But we need to make sure the people trust us. If we don't, it'll all fall apart. His words echoed in my mind. Trust. It was the one thing that could either hold us together or tear us apart. But could I trust the people around me? Could I trust myself? The room was silent, and the weight of the decision hung in the air. Outside, the wind began to pick up again, and I couldn't help but feel that the storm was far from over. I sat at the head of the table, the weight of the situation pressing down on me as the council members looked on, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the knowledge that the decisions we made today would shape the future of the town and determine the fate of the treasure hidden beneath the dam. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to say something, to take control. But deep down, I was just as uncertain as they were. The treasure had brought hope to this place, but it had also brought fear, division, and greed. Outside, the sky was overcast, clouds swirling like a storm that was about to break. The storm was coming, not just in the weather, but in the hearts of the people. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. We all know what's at stake. I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. The treasure could change everything for the town, but we can't let it tear us apart. We need to set aside our differences and work together. Sheriff Thomas nodded, his eyes steady, as always. He was right beside me, a constant in the chaos that had become our lives. I agree, Jack. But we need to act quickly. There's no telling who's already heard about this. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. His words hung in the air, a cold reminder of the stakes we were dealing with. I nodded slowly. We need to make sure the town benefits from this. Not just a few people, but everyone. This isn't about just handing out money. It's about rebuilding, about creating something that lasts. There was a murmur of agreement around the table, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. No one truly believed that this could be done without conflict. How do we divide it then? Rebecca, one of the council members, asked. How do we make sure no one takes more than they deserve? It was a question that had been hanging over all of us since the discovery. I wasn't sure if there was an answer, but I knew we had to try. We create a system, I said, leaning forward, my hands clenched on the table. A board, a group of people who are trusted by the town, people who have nothing to gain personally from this. They'll be the ones to decide how the treasure is used, how it's spent, and who gets what. That sounds fair, said Aaron, another council member. But how do we know they'll make the right choices? We won't know for sure, Sheriff Thomas replied, his voice low but firm. But we have to trust them, and we have to hold them accountable. I looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. The tension was palpable, but there was also something else, something that felt like the first step toward healing. We're going to make this work, I said, my voice more confident than I felt. But it's going to take all of us, together. No one person can control this. We have to make sure the treasure goes where it's needed most. What if people start fighting for it? Another council member, Greg, asked. What if things get out of hand? The question hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. Then we step in, I said. We keep the peace. We make sure that no one gets left behind. But even as I said the words, I knew there were cracks forming in the foundation. It wasn't just about the treasure anymore. It was about power. And once power entered the equation, there would always be someone looking to take it. Sheriff Thomas stood up, his gaze sweeping the room. We'll need a plan for the distribution. A way to make sure it's done fairly. We can't afford to have anyone feeling like they were cheated out of their share. I nodded. We'll get to work on that immediately. But we also need to make sure the outside world doesn't get wind of this. If word spreads, we'll be dealing with people who aren't interested in fairness. They'll be after their own piece of the pie. Rebecca spoke up. Are we really prepared to keep this secret, Jack? There's no way we can hide something this big forever. I looked at her, a mix of frustration and determination in my gaze. I don't know, I admitted. But we have to try. The town can't handle the chaos that would come if this got out. If we want to rebuild, we have to keep it together. The room fell silent again, everyone lost in their thoughts. The weight of the decision, of the responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. There was no going back now. The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside, too. I could feel it, creeping up on all of us. The town was on the brink of something, and I wasn't sure if it was the beginning of something great, or the start of something we couldn't control. "We'll need to move quickly," Sheriff Thomas said, breaking the silence. "But we'll do it right. We'll make sure the town benefits, and we'll make sure we don't tear each other apart in the process." His words were comforting, but I knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. As the meeting ended, I stepped outside, the cool air of the storm hitting my face. The rain had slowed, but I could still feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. We were about to change everything, and I wasn't sure if we were ready for what was coming next. I stood in the center of the town square, the weight of the storm that had passed now replaced by an even heavier tension in the air. The decision was made, the town was watching, and I knew there was no turning back. The treasure buried in the dam had already changed everything, and now, the ripple effects were impossible to ignore. I could feel the eyes of the townspeople on me as they moved about, some whispering, some avoiding eye contact, all unsure of what was to come next. But I wasn't sure either. The council had decided on the distribution plan, but there were too many variables, too many risks, and too many people with their own agendas. The meeting had gone as well as expected, with heated arguments about fairness and who deserved what. But no matter how much we tried to control the situation, the reality was that power was shifting. The more we tried to manage the treasure, the more it slipped through our fingers. The plan we had in place was shaky, at best, and I knew that we were already walking a fine line. Sheriff Thomas had made it clear, if we didn't act fast, the outside world would come in like a storm, and once that happened, the town would be torn apart. I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold off the inevitable. People from outside had already started to circle, their eyes focused on the treasure and what it could bring them. They weren't interested in the town's well-being. They only saw an opportunity to claim what was buried. The worst part was that I wasn't sure I could stop them. The treasure wasn't just about money. It was about control. Everyone wanted a piece of it, and no one was willing to let go. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see Sheriff Thomas walking toward me, his face set in that familiar, determined expression. "Jack," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I nodded, already knowing what was coming. "I know," I replied. "I've been thinking about it. It's all starting to unravel, isn't it?" "It's not just unraveling. It's already out of control," Sheriff Thomas said, his eyes scanning the square. "The tension is palpable. People are getting restless. And we both know that when that happens, anything can go wrong." I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We act now," he said, his eyes hardening. "We need to keep the treasure in town, and we need to make sure the right people get a say in how it's used. But we can't keep dancing around this forever. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes." I nodded slowly, knowing he was right. "I've been thinking about that," I said. "I don't trust the people from outside. I don't trust anyone who doesn't have the town's best interests at heart." "Then we have to act," Sheriff Thomas said, his voice firm. "If we don't, we'll lose everything we've worked for." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The storm was coming, and it wasn't just in the sky. It was here, in the hearts of the people, in the decisions we made, and in the pressure we were all under. "What's the plan?" I asked. "We set up a deadline," he said. "We announce it to the town. Tell them that the treasure will be distributed at a specific time, and the council will decide who gets what. No exceptions. We need to keep the peace, and we need to show the outside world that we're in control." I thought for a moment, weighing his words. What if the outside world doesn't respect the deadline? I asked, my voice laced with doubt. "They'll respect it, or they'll face the consequences," Sheriff Thomas said, his tone hard. "We need to make it clear that we're not going to back down. The town needs to know that we won't let anyone come in and take what's ours." The more he spoke, the more I felt the pressure weighing on me. It was no longer just about the treasure. It was about the future of the town. I had to make sure the right people were in control. But who could I trust? Sheriff Thomas? Maybe. But there were still so many unknowns. I looked out at the town square, at the people going about their day, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. They had no idea what was coming. But I did. And the thought of what could happen next made my stomach turn. The treasure had already changed everything. but I couldn't help but wonder if we had made a mistake. What if the plan didn't work? What if we couldn't control the chaos? I had no answers. All I knew was that the clock was ticking, and soon, everyone would have to make their move. Let's do it, I said, my voice steady but my mind racing. We announce the deadline. We set the terms, and we make it clear that this town won't be torn apart over this. Sheriff Thomas nodded, a grim smile crossing his face. We'll do it, but we'll have to be ready for anything. And with that, we walked toward the town hall, knowing that the hardest part was yet to come. I walked through the rain-soaked streets of the town, my boots splashing against the puddles as I made my way toward the town hall. The weight of the decision was heavy on my shoulders. It had only been a few days since we announced the deadline for the distribution of the treasure, but already the tension was rising. I could feel it in the air, thick and charged, like a storm ready to break. The people were restless, uncertain of what the future held. Some were hopeful, others were anxious, and a few had already begun to question the fairness of the process. I had hoped the announcement would bring clarity, that it would bring unity. Instead, it had opened up old wounds, and now, the town felt more divided than ever. The council had worked tirelessly to put the plan in place, to create a system that would benefit everyone. But even with the best intentions, I knew that things were about to get much harder. The outside world was watching us, and the greed and ambition that had already started to creep and would only grow. As I approached the town hall, I could see a crowd beginning to gather outside. They weren't just here for a meeting. They were here for answers. The deadline was close, and the people were anxious. Sheriff Thomas was already there, standing at the entrance, watching the crowd. He gave me a brief nod as I approached, his face set in a stern expression. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with the weight of the moment. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I didn't have a choice. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's just hope this goes smoothly." Sheriff Thomas didn't respond immediately, but his gaze remained fixed on the crowd. "We can't control everything, Jack," he said finally. "But we can make sure that we do everything we can to keep things from falling apart." His words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. The plan had been set, the council had agreed, but there were still so many unknowns. So many people who had their own idea of what the treasure meant. "We're going to have to move fast," I said, glancing at the crowd that had started to grow larger. "I don't know how long we can keep them all calm." Sheriff Thomas nodded. "We'll manage. We always do." We walked into the town hall together, and the room fell silent as we entered. The council members were already seated, their faces tense, waiting for the meeting to begin. As I took my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, but there was something else there too, something darker. The treasure had started as a symbol of hope, but now it felt like a ticking time bomb. The people in the town hall weren't just worried about what would happen with the treasure, they were worried about what would happen to them. "All right, let's get started," I said, trying to steady my nerves. "We've set a deadline for the distribution, and we need to make sure everything goes according to plan." I looked around the room at the council members. "But we also need to make sure that we're ready for anything. We can't afford any surprises." There was a murmur of agreement, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They were as unsure as I was, and that made me even more nervous. "What's the next step?" Sheriff Thomas asked, his voice steady. "We need to finalize the list of people who will oversee the distribution," I said. "We've got to make sure it's done fairly, without anyone trying to take advantage of the situation." "And what about the outsiders?" Rebecca, one of the council members, asked. "What if they show up, like we're expecting?" I paused for a moment, thinking. "If they do, we deal with them. We make it clear that the treasure stays here, that this town controls it, not anyone else." Sheriff Thomas nodded. "I'll make sure the town knows that. We can't let them come in and take what's ours." The tension in the room was palpable, but for the first time in days, I felt a sense of resolve. We couldn't let the outside world take control of what we had worked so hard to build. "We need to be prepared for anything," I said, my voice firm. "Once we start distributing the treasure, there will be no turning back. People will want more. They'll want power. But we can't let them tear this town apart. Not now." The room fell silent again, each council member lost in their own thoughts. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the crowd growing louder. The storm was almost here, and I wasn't sure if we could weather it. But I knew one thing for certain. We had to try. The treasure had brought us to this point, and now, it was up to us to decide what kind of future we wanted. I could hear the murmurs of the crowd through the walls of the town hall. It wouldn't be long before they would want answers. I stood up, ready to face the storm that was coming. And as I stepped to the front of the room, I realized that no matter what happened, the future of this town was now in our hands. The town hall was filled with an uneasy quiet as the council members gathered around the table. The people outside had grown restless. I could hear their murmurs, their whispered concerns, the collective energy of the town building towards something that was beyond my control. This was it, the moment where everything changed. The treasure buried under the dam had already brought more to this town than we could have ever imagined. But now, with the outside world circling and the town's fate in our hands, I could feel the weight of it all. Sheriff Thomas stood at the entrance, his gaze sweeping across the room. He didn't say anything, but there was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. He was ready for whatever came next. But the question remained, were we? I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself as I stood up to speak. We've reached the point of no return, I said, my voice steady but firm. We can't turn back now. We've made our decision. The treasure will be distributed according to the council's plan, and we will do it fairly. But we also need to make it clear to the people that no one person will control it. This isn't just about money, it's about our future. There was a tense silence as everyone in the room absorbed what I had said. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, each of them waiting for someone to say the next thing. We'll have the distribution ceremony tomorrow, I continued, trying to push the nerves down. We'll bring the treasure into the square and make it known to everyone that this is for the town. This isn't for individuals to fight over. We're doing this for the community, for the future. A few heads nodded in agreement, but I saw skepticism in some faces. I didn't blame them. How could I expect them to trust this plan after everything that had happened? And if outsiders show up? One of the council members, Greg, asked, his voice laced with concern. What if they try to take it from us? I took a deep breath. We make it clear to them that this town is not for sale. We've fought for too long to let someone else come in and take what's ours. Sheriff Thomas stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. Jack's right, he said. We need to stand firm. The moment we show weakness, we'll lose everything. The tension in the room tightened, but I could feel a shift, a sense of unity, even if it was fragile. This wasn't just about money. It was about the town's identity. We had a chance to rebuild, to prove that we were stronger than the divisions that had plagued us for so long. But I knew there was still so much uncertainty. We have a plan, I said, trying to project more confidence than I felt. But we also need to be prepared for the worst. We can't let greed or fear tear us apart. Sheriff Thomas nodded. Agreed. And we'll be ready. The meeting continued, and we hammered out the last details of the plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do. I knew there would be challenges ahead. People would test us, try to take what wasn't theirs. But as the meeting came to a close, I realized that this was a turning point. The town had a chance to build something new, to heal the old wounds. But it wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and sacrifice. As I stepped outside, the sky had cleared, and the sun was setting in a fiery orange glow. For a brief moment, it felt like everything might actually be all right. But the moment quickly passed as I remembered what was at stake. The treasure wasn't just a financial boon. It was a symbol of the town's future, a future that was now in our hands. We would have to fight for it, protect it, and ensure that it didn't slip through our fingers. I walked back toward the town square, the weight of the upcoming ceremony heavy on my shoulders. The people were waiting, the council was ready, and I had to step up. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something new, or the end of everything we had worked for. I wasn't sure which it would be, but I knew one thing for certain. The storm had come, and we were going to face it head-on. Immerse yourself in a gripping tale of resilience and suspense with this collection of veteran stories that uncover the power of hidden treasures, small-town drama, and the human spirit. Follow the journey of a veteran who inherits a forgotten dam, uncovering secrets that could change everything. As he navigates through power struggles, greed, and the bonds of community, these veteran stories bring you closer to understanding the challenges that come with a past that refuses to stay buried. With each twist and turn, the town grapples with the implications of the discovery, testing the strength of friendships, trust, and survival. If you love veteran stories that delve into the heart of mystery and self-discovery, this is one you won't want to miss. Will the veteran be able to protect what he's found, or will outside forces tear the town apart? These veteran stories are filled with unexpected heroes, fierce battles for what's right, and the undeniable force of hope. The treasure may be hidden, but the truth is always just around the corner. Explore these veteran stories today and experience the thrill of survival, loyalty, and the choices that define our destinies.